G'day. AJ here. AJ, yeah, my last name. What is it again? Oh yeah, Mahari. I'm here live for the 4th try. Because the other two, not only did not, notifications did not go through, but I couldn't even show it, see the stream showing up on my channel. So I don't know if there's, okay, that seems to be working. Now I'll check the second thing before I start because it just doesn't seem to be working so well tonight. Alright, it might work now. Could have been something in the settings, but I don't know. How many more things can I really screw up? Okay, well it shows up now, but it shows up with it. Yeah, okay. My top of the channel picture. Anyway, what can you do? So yeah, this is borderline personality and relationships. They're just impossible and unhealthy. And the painful collision of the non-borderline with the borderline, many of whom the non-borderlines are codependent. Well, many of the people with BPD are codependent too, but like, hey, not the exact same. And the thing with that is this collision of emotional worlds, you know, emotional and relational worlds. I mean, for me to say it's incredibly painful is an understatement, right? So, and this is why I think, and of course not all people with BPD are in the same place, not all people with codependency are exactly the same, but I think it really matters to say that these relationships are impossible and they are unhealthy. And so that's going to be for the vast majority of people with BPD. It's going to be for people who are trying to have relationships with them. Even when you're trying to be close, for a lot of people with BPD, if you're I mean, in any relationship type, if you're trying to be close to somebody with BPD, it can still be an impossibility. Especially, it's just not healthy. So one thing, oh good, it seems like at least I'm live now, because I was trying 3 times prior, but I was not. I was live in a vacuum all by myself. Okay, what am I looking for now? I've got all of these windows, just too many windows. Okay, so I was just going to do this, but then I'm just a little worried about if the sound is okay when the camera's on versus when the camera's not on. Looks like there are a few people here and some coming and going, so I wonder if anybody might just be so kind as to type in that the sound is okay or not. That would be really helpful before I get talking about this some more. But the hope is some people might come along and want to share some experiences too, whether people have BPD or not, because in the last live stream there was three or four, maybe at 1.5 people with BPD, exes, etc. So, oh good, it sounds good. Thank you for telling me that, Christina. So I just didn't want to be all echoey nuts to, that's not good. So I think that, there's some things. Now, how can I put this? I want to be careful how I say this. There are some things in common, like that overlap, commonality of people with BPD who are also codependent and people without BPD who are codependent. But I'm not saying it's the same. But what happens for people with BPD, obviously, no self, arrested emotional self, all that stuff I'm always saying. But so they don't, their emotional intelligence kind of ceases to grow with that emotional arrested development age of 2, or largely is impeded and cannot stay in balance with their age and their increasing intellectual, intelligence up here. So the thing is, for people with codependency, it's not that dire, but excuse me, what can happen for sure is a lot of people with codependency have various different degrees. Oh, hi there, Elle. Nice to see some people here. It just wasn't working before at all. People with codependency have varying different degrees of, woundedness, of course, as I've said, and codependency is rooted in childhood. And I just wanted to, whereas I'm headed in 3 directions in my head, just give me a second. So codependency is not a disease. Codependency is not a personality disorder. Codependency is not recognized, thank heavens, by the DSM-5. I don't even think it's in the ICD either. So codependency is something that is adverse childhood experience Hey there, Deborah. And it's adverse childhood experience. And what happens with that is for many people with codependency, not all, but they have cluster B parents or a cluster B parent. And then they get maybe more needs met. Maybe if the mother isn't a cluster B parent, they can have more needs met in, so you don't end up with BPD or NPD. But then there's this real woundedness and lack of needs met as a kid is growing up, and maybe not, the needs of a infant or a 1-year-old or a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5-year-old, but definitely there isn't healthy modeling, which children also learn from and need, that to the degree to which people with codependency can also, and especially if they have a cluster B parent, and it's different for all codependents, but they may well not have developed as much emotional intelligence due to woundedness as they would benefit from developing. So that's one of the overlaps. I mean, people with BPD really don't develop emotional intelligence unless and until they really get into that deeper work. So not in DBT therapy are they going to develop that, because DBT therapy actually relies a lot on this intelligence up here, intellectual, for it's all sort of, I don't find it to be a very feelings-friendly modality, but I mean, it's good. But so the thing is, anyway, between people with codependency and people with BPD trying to relate, then emotionally speaking and relationally speaking, for all intents and purposes, really one way to describe it is that worlds totally collide. And then what's that about, right? So, and people with codependency can have some emotional intelligence, but maybe lacking some emotional intelligence, but not as lacking as people with BPD. But, so the impossibility at the core of all this, that I talked a bit about in the video I put up earlier today, it has a lot to do with the fact that people with BPD can't get where they get, but they can't stay close. And they think they want to be close, but then, and all that. And so for people with codependence, well, that's weird. It just flipped the, never mind. For people with codependency, or anybody trying to relate to somebody with BPD, then the other challenge becomes, like, often people just run into this, right? They, like, what's going on here? And it gets confusing even if you have an idea of what might be going wrong. So, but this emotional intelligence is so crucial because it's lacking and missing, pretty much missing in those with BPD. Unless and until, and I don't know what to say about quantifying, a lot of treatment. So not a year of DBT. Now, I have to say this because I have clients, who keep on telling me that, they have an ex right now, or a person they're still with or hanging in there with BPD, that they finally just went and started DBT therapy. And then they've been told, hey, you, go back there, Buffy, excuse me. They've been told by the partner or the ex or whomever in their life with BPD that the person with BPD will say to them, quote, well, I'm gonna be recovered in about a year. This is kind of, Buffy, go lay down. It's kind of the misnomer that a lot of people with BPD who are seeking treatment seem to have also, is that the DBT is going to be the cure-all, and it's not. So, but this other thing I'm working my way toward, and I hope I can do this without any sound problems occurring in the middle, is I'm working my way to just talk a little bit more about, now I don't remember where this is, now I'm probably going to put the wrong clip on. Yeah, that's the wrong one right there. There we go. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, just for a couple minutes, the reality of how much and how large a role emotional intelligence plays in the way we do or do not get along with people. So without emotional intelligence, it's pretty darn difficult. And that's one of the impossibilities of trying to expect a person with BPD to relate to you in any way that makes sense whatsoever. Now I think I have to find something else in the meantime here. Oh shoot, I've got nothing. There we go. That's what I needed to choose in the meantime. So what is emotional intelligence and why is it so important? So it's called emotional intelligence, or EQ, because I sometimes refer to it as, emotional quotient versus IQ. And So it's funny because I read somewhere they said it continues to be increasingly popular skill to have in the professional world. Well, that might be true. But wow, it's a skill that we are meant to learn in childhood from, quote, healthy parents, unquote. So people with BPD don't learn that there. And some people with codependency learn a little bit, but maybe not like anywhere near enough. So developing EQ skills is a part of recovery. I mean, people with BPD will take a lot longer. It's deeper work. But for people with codependency and after these relationships, yeah, a big part of recovery involves building your emotional intelligence, your EQ skills. Not the only thing, but it's a big part. And it's also a stark difference, even though there's overlapping challenges with emotional intelligence that aren't the same, but people with codependency can still be needing to build and learn a lot more about emotional, Buffy, go lay down! Sorry, intelligence, and people with BP lacking it. So, 10 ways to increase your emotional intelligence or your emotional quotient, EQ. Well, the first one is to be able to utilize, and I say be able to because a lot of codependents need to learn this. I work with a lot of clients to help them learn this. But utilize, so learn, and then utilize an assertive style of communicating, which a lot of people with codependency have difficulty with. This isn't even on the map for people with BPD, by the way. So assertive communication goes a long way toward, being able to be respectful when you're communicating. Try to talk about, check in with somebody if something felt disrespectful or there's some kind of disagreement. And emotionally intelligent people know how to communicate their opinions and needs in a direct way, yes, but still respectfully. And I would say it takes emotional intelligence also. This is what I'm always trying to do on this channel, actually. I have the emotional intelligence myself to be able to just, when people disagree with me or with each other or on this or that about what I said about something or other, that, well, if we both have emotional intelligence, right, we built up our emotional intelligence and our EQ, then we will be able to respect each other, disagree with what to do, and this is true of anybody else in your life, can disagree about what you're disagreeing about with emotional intelligence, but you don't have to take it personally, and you don't have any. Codependent people often have, like I said, lacking EQ, not totally or not like borderlines, but often this control need, okay? So it's not exactly the right fighting of BPD. But a lot of people with codependency believe when they have an opinion or they don't like somebody else's opinion, well, they gotta really set them straight. And that would be control needs and a sort of indicator of lower emotional intelligence. Because when you have higher emotional intelligence, it's very simple to agree to disagree, right? And that you don't feel like you're losing something, or that in that codependent sense you have to change the other person's opinion, or somehow you might feel, devalued would be the wrong word. You might feel somewhat hurt or just not be sure how to tolerate in a codependent way somebody not seeing it your way. So this happens more so for people with BPD, but for people with codependency as well. So, where was I in my thoughts here? Yeah, whenever there is a conflict, number 2, yes, the second thing I was going to say. When you build up your EQ skills, your emotional intelligence, then you can respond instead of reacting to conflict. Which is what I was really just talking about there, right? During instances of conflict, emotional outbursts and feelings of anger are common when people have low EQ, and that's especially true with people with BPD, isn't it? And never mind the narcissist. They get really angry and ragey and all that stuff, but can't reach most of them. The emotionally intelligent person knows how to stay calm during stressful situations. Now, that's important for people with codependency to realize, that staying calm in a stressful situation or when you're being yelled or screamed at, etc., doesn't mean that you give yourself up or abandon yourself to that, right? Because that's what a lot of people do with codependency. But so the more emotional intelligence or EQ skills one has too, then you don't make impulsive decisions. So we look at people with BPD. What's at the heart of that for a lot of people, amongst other things? Impulsivity, for sure, because they don't have the emotional intelligence to not be impulsive, but they don't know who they are either, so it's both. And so anyways, yeah, when you don't make impulsive decisions that can lead to even bigger problems, then you can understand that, like what you can identify. What is your goal now that you're in this conflict or somebody's brought conflict to you? So it's important in times of conflict to have a goal aimed toward resolution. Now, not necessarily with a cluster B, because that doesn't work, but maybe then you need to be thinking about yourself and what do you need to have resolution for yourself in those moments, and not stay in a place where somebody's yelling, screaming at you, or worse, an adverse experience or environment. And then you can focus on ensuring that your actions and words are in alignment with you and your needs if somebody else is, cluster B and they're not treating you right, to put it mildly. So also emotional intelligence allows us to have active but effective listening skills. So in conversations, the more intelligent people are, emotionally intelligent people are, they will listen for clarity instead of just waiting for their turn to speak. Because again, why do people with BPD do that? Impulsivity, and a lot of self-absorption, to be honest, too. So people with emotional intelligence make sure they understand what's being said. You're trying to parse it. Okay, this person just said this. What could they possibly mean by that? Which is not easy to do if somebody with BPD is just throwing stuff at you really quickly, like even verbally. But so emotional intelligence allows us to read the nonverbal details of the conversation, which is only like about 93% of the whole thing anyway, and show respect for the person they're speaking to. Well, unless, of course, it's really disrespectful and or worse. But emotional intelligence is also motivating. So people with emotional intelligence are self-motivated, and their attitude, it can motivate others, but it likely won't motivate a cluster B. And you can set goals, and the more emotional EQ skills you build and emotional intelligence that you build or learn, develop for yourself, can be more resilient in the face of any and all challenges. Still doesn't mean really it's a good idea to stay with cluster B, though, or the person with BPD. And then the last thing I'll say about this, or maybe there's a couple other things, is that emotional intelligence is really a way to find, it allows us to have a positive attitude. It allows us to see the positive versus the negative. We'd like to tie this in by saying, so a lot of people with BPD have an absolute predilection, they don't have the emotional intelligence, but they have had such adverse experience in their lives, but they are predominantly overrepresented. Everything they think and feel and believe is overridingly usually more negative than positive. So, and that would be an absence of IQ as well as experience, and that they don't have a self. So it's important for people with codependency to work on this emotional intelligence so you won't underestimate the power of your own positive attitude, and then how to have boundaries around that so you're not just over giving all this positivity to somebody who's just dropping it on the floor in the case of the BPD, or the narcissist will be sucking it all up, so to speak, and exhausting you with it by doing so. So people with emotional intelligence have awareness of their moods and of those around them, and guard their attitude and or conduct, behavior accordingly. So I'll just skip to the next one here. I won't say too much about each of these, or maybe there's still a couple. So with emotional intelligence, people get more self-awareness, right? Because when you know yourself, as people with BPD don't, but people with codependency need to know themselves more so that you become more self-aware of the codependent patterns of relating that you really will be best off by looking at, getting into healing recovery for, and changing. Because the more emotionally intelligent somebody is, the more self-aware they will be, and the more they will not only be intuitive, but be in tune with their intuition. that gut instinct factor that a lot of codependents override, in giving to, that overgiving, that caretaking, all that stuff with the cluster B. And you can pick up on other people's body language. Of course, some people with BPD make that obvious. And the other thing, too, is with emotional intelligence, people can take critique well, right? But we shouldn't hang around for what's actually not healthy or way over the line, but constructive critique or criticism, or something being pointed out that maybe you made an error about. It's like, great, thank you, I'm glad to know that now. Like in the I don't think that part was up, but in the last live stream I couldn't figure out where a certain place in Ontario was, and I thought it was somewhere, and somebody else said where it was, and then I'm like, okay, but I thought it was, but they were absolutely right, I was wrong. It's like, good, I learned something. So it's important part of increasing your emotional intelligence is to be able to take constructive criticism or critique. Because it might be at work, you might be just getting an appraisal, or it could be you're taking a university course or you're younger and you're a university student, and the professor's going to have some critique for you, hopefully along with some positive things to say about your work. But this can happen in any area of life. So instead of getting offended or defensive, people with high EQ or emotional quotient or emotional intelligence can take a few moments to understand where the critique is coming from, how it's affecting others or their own performance. That's more or less like if it's work or school. And emotionally intelligent people know how to empathize well, and even people who need to build up their EQ skills with codependency are often over empathizing, but then it's not just over empathizing, it's because you're self-abandoning yourself. That empathy you should be giving to you is going to the person with BPD. So empathy, but I would say there's a difference between a distinction of healthy empathy versus just empathy. Helps people with emotional intelligence to relate. But if you have codependency, that can get in the way. So, and being approachable. Being approachable and amenable to conversation. Even if somebody wants to check something out with you, might be a little difficult. Well, this is why people with BPD have no luck with this, because they don't have the EQ. They don't have the emotional intelligence. And people with codependency usually have some. I'm not saying you don't have any, but can benefit from building more. So yeah, people with high emotional intelligence, well, moderate to high at least, but the higher the better, are more approachable and more sociable, and have just more communication skills and that type of thing. And many of these skills may seem to be best suited for, an understanding of others or self in a basic human psychology. But EQ skills may come more easily and naturally to people who do have empathy. And I'm not saying people with BP are incapable of empathy, but they don't have a self and they don't have this emotional intelligence. And that would be why when they're triggered, well, the empathy goes away in a heartbeat. So anyway, that's just a little bit about emotional intelligence. And the difference, of course, is that people with codependency have some emotional intelligence, and to some level or other, but it might be impeded, and you can benefit from building those EQ skills. But people with BPD, they don't have that going on at all. And they probably wouldn't want to know that. So just a second here. What am I doing? I could have done this before. Okay, there we go. I just think I should practice being on camera more in lives because neck problems, Christina, you asked, why would a person with BPD push someone away repeatedly over time, but still say they feel abandoned by the person they're pushing away? Yeah, well, it's because of that childlike presentation, lack of emotional intelligence, past adverse childhood experience. They lack self. They don't trust others. So, and then when they don't understand what's happening to them in the approach avoidance, I'm always talking about the fear of engulfment at one end, the fear of abandonment at the other. So when they feel engulfed and they have the fear of engulfment, push away is what they're going to do. And then it might happen quickly for somebody with BPD, or it might take a couple hours or a couple days, or for a quiet borderline, a couple weeks, you never know. But then they're going to feel, once they get out of that, stress and triggered emotional dysregulation of engulfment, fear of engulfment, so they feel like they're being all controlled and everything, because they don't even understand intimacy and emotional intimacy and that closeness as love. They do not take it in. It becomes something equally as threatening as abandonment. Then when they get back to feeling abandoned, well, then they have a problem, because they need to get close again. And it's just like, that's what it is, the vacillating back and forth between that always, because what's in between fear of engulfment and, like, at one end of the spectrum, or the experience of people with BPD, and fear of abandonment at the other? Nothing. They can only just keep going back and forth, which means push, pull, push, pull. And so, but when they do these things, they don't know why they're doing them. And so they always attribute how they feel. So they feel abandoned. Well, you must have abandoned them. They feel ABC. Well, it's because it's because you're like this. You did this. This is what people with BPD, quote, think or experience. But it's because they externalize out all this dysregulated emotion, what's going on. Sometimes the repetition cycles and the dissociation that can come, and or age regression, all this stuff coming from inside of them from the past, they don't get all that. So they just figure, well, you made them feel all that, who's ever closest to them. So that's why it's crazy making when they push away and then they feel abandoned, and then they think you abandoned them when you didn't do anything at all. Hi, Natalie. Oh, you think impulsivity is your main BPD trait? Yeah, well, that's can be a really difficult thing, but it's not in isolation, right? So there's other things to work on around that to understand that better, obviously, because it's not easy to tame that impulsivity, for sure, or to learn. It has a lot to do with a lot of people with BPD can't stand, they need immediate gratification. So impulsivity is maybe aligned with that, or part of that. Need immediate gratification. Can't delay gratification. Because impulsivity is like, you got to have what you got to have now, or whatever you need, I'm not saying you in particular, but that's the way it works for a lot of people with BPD. Hi there, For Freedom. How are you? And, hey, Wheels, how are you doing? I'm glad you got here. And so, I have more I can say, but I wonder if people have more that they want to share or ask or etc. Because I think this impossibility of these relationships is obviously something people don't want to hear a whole lot more than the video I did a few days ago, that people with BPD have not, cannot, and will not love you. It's like, so now I'm saying to people who are in relationships with people with BPD, or maybe they're exes of yours now, or whatever the case, but they're impossible. I'm not saying people with BPD present as impossible until they learn more, etc., and get way more therapy. But the relationships are impossible. They're just not going to work. It's an automatic collision course emotionally between people with BPD and most people who are with people with BPD being codependent. So, but I just want to say, it's not like, I really still, and I'm going to emphasize again, BPD is an adverse childhood, it responds to adverse childhood experience. And so is codependency to a lesser degree. And you don't have to pathologize these things, because that's not where the solutions lie, right? The solutions lie in people with BPD getting the treatment they need and learning and growing and sticking with that. And the solutions, and not necessarily for a relationship to last, but overall, I'm just saying. And the solution for people with codependency is to heal and recover and understand what wounded you in childhood and what's the woundedness in your child, how to do that, and how to go forward and build your EQ skills, your emotional intelligence even more, because people with BP don't have it. But this is also important. But hey there, Jamal. And Allie, you made it too. Good. Nice to see you. How you doing? So I think it's, and for a couple of people here with BPD, I don't know if you can relate to what I'm saying, but Do you remember a time in your life, if you have some emotional intelligence now, when you really didn't? Or do you know what that is yet? And I mean that with all due respect. And also, what else was I going to ask or say? It'll come back to me in a moment, one way or the other. Yeah, well, again, to get back to this, impossibility of the relationships working out, because it's like what each person actually is doing. So people with BPD in a relationship and the codependent, not the same, kind of coming at it maybe from opposite ends of not the same problem or same situation, but something that, like I said, has overlap to it. So people with BPD are seeking identity through others, and they don't know that. People with codependency are seeking to avoid something about themselves often, or many things, like their own pain, or might have learned to become conflict avoidant. And the first thing the person with BPD does after the idealization phase, etc., boom, conflict. And then the person with codependency doesn't know what to do with that, because that could have been something that was wounding to somebody with codependency in their childhood. So I think it's really important. I felt like it was time to really just, not mince words and not try to, say 10 things at once, but to say that these relationships are doomed, they're painful for people with BPD, and they're going to be painful for people with codependency, and they are impossible. So this is where the codependency, I guess I could put it this way, the codependency of the person with BPD and the codependency of just a codependent who's a non-borderline meet in this dance of impossibility in which emotional worlds and relational styles have to collide. And then codependents acquiesce, codependents overgive, codependents try to rescue and enable, so codependents self-abandon. And that often gets into the codependency reality of the fawn codependent response. It's just continual fawning and giving, and fawning and giving, and and sometimes people with codependency will say to the person, partner, whatever, with BPD, like, what do you do? Like, what? They might ask a question, because not all people with codependency are as conflict avoidant as maybe the majority are. And Natalie said, I think my intellectual EQ, because IQ is your intelligence quotient, but you said, you are talking about that. I'm sorry. Okay, let me start over. You said, I think my IQ is probably average for my age. I also think my EQ is like a 16-year-old sometimes. 16-year-old, or sometimes a 5-year-old. Yeah, well, and I don't know if you want to share it all or not, but if you could share a little bit, what might that look like? Like, for example, what might, you don't have to write the whole thing out, but I mean, what might happen for you when emotional intelligence would really be helpful, and maybe knowing yourself better would be really helpful, but maybe the EQ of the 5-year-old or a 16-year-old shows up instead of, I'm the age that you are. So, yeah. But I just wonder, like, has anybody ever thought of it this way before, that, people, it's so confusing for probably people with BPD, what's happening to them, and for people with codependency in these relationships. But have people ever thought about the collision of the emotions and the relating and or relational styles? Because people with BPD don't really have a relational style unless, and whatever the measurement is, but like a lot of therapy and self-awareness, and not everybody with BPD is the same. But it's hard to put this into language without spending 20 minutes just, farting around with words and caveats, right? So I kind of know that lately I'm sounding more universal, but I don't mean it exactly like it's every single person with BPD in the exact same place, like at ground zero. Wheels, I'm doing okay. I've been processing a lot of things and setting some better boundaries. Well, good for you. Because, yes, boundaries are something that people with BPD lack and don't like in others, but that people with codependency really need to learn how to set as well. But then it's hard to be working on setting a boundary or taking care of yourself when you are in fact abandoning yourself over and over and over again, which is really a learned relational pattern. So like I've said before, codependents have their own unhealthy relational patterns that were learned in childhood for various reasons, and people's, but there are only so many reasons. But again, I just want to say codependency is not a disease, and to call it that is ridiculous. And I forgot to put it under the last live stream, maybe because it went so long. I had to chop it somewhere. I had to edit it. And I thought, well, I'll just, in trying to save the comments, I thought I would just I did go into the Creator Studio, and I went to the editor, and I went to the time that I wanted to stop it at, because I was thinking I might put the full one up on a website or something. We'll see. But it just was too long for here. And so bottom line is, imagine my shock and surprise. I was not pleased at all. Getting the Creator Studio, I think, well, I can just trim this here, and then maybe I already downloaded a full copy of it, and then I was like, the last live stream talking about, I could trim it at this time and then keep the rest, or I have it downloaded. And you know what the stupid thing, the editor, yes, the brand new, supposedly spanking oh so awesome editor, I can't use it much. It said, so I hit the trim button, it said, sorry, this video is too long to trim. I'm like, what? So I had to download it, put it in the video software I use. I kind of knew around the time area, go chop that, and then I just did a few little other edits. But I can't even remember why I mentioned that now. Sorry. But there was a point to come with that. I don't know what it is anymore, though. Natalie, like when a supervisor tells me something in a stern or angry tone, I feel like this teeny little kid. Well, yeah, that's a good example, because what I was talking about just a few minutes ago, when people have, the need, what higher, I mean, oh, geez, I'm mixing them up. Higher emotional intelligence really helps with is being able to be critiqued, right? Or being able to get, withstand constructive criticism. And like I said, mostly like that would apply largely at work or if somebody was in school. And then when you're saying when they tell you something in a stern or angry tone, what if maybe, and I'm not questioning you, but what if maybe they're just being matter of fact and they don't mean to sound stern or angry? I wonder, have you ever thought about that? Could they just be being matter of fact, which means they're going to get to their point about whatever it is at work, but there's not going to be any emotional content there? Because that getting to the heart of the fact of the matter can be that what a lot of bosses might do, or a lot of people might do in a work environment. What a professor might do in a classroom at a given moment. Or when working with a student with some issue or problem, or discussing an essay or something, they might really just get to the matter of the facts of the matter at hand, and they're not trying to be cold, and they're not angry, but they're not in an emotional place either, because it's like a quote professional thing, unquote. Allie, I bet like that too. To Natalie, I think you mean you get like that. Okay. When people talk a certain way, certain tones make me really upset. Well, and I wonder, and that's true for so many people. I mean, with BPD that even are less aware than you two are. So I wonder, what do you think about that, Allie or Natalie? Why do you think that is, if you have an opinion on that? Wheels, I feel insanely guilty for setting these boundaries, but I know I have to keep myself sane. Well, yeah, and I mean, you really have to keep working at we know you probably know too, where the guilt's coming from, but it's not your guilt, they're the guilty party. So you have to keep working on that part, because that's really uncomfortable and painful to go through. Hey there, Roller Girl. You said hi to me and everyone. Yes, I remember your name and where you live. The state. Yeah. Christina, if a person with BPD starts seeing you as a bad person after devaluation, do they ever over time, with no contact, remember how you really are, or at least that you were kind to them. No, not really. I mean, not unless they get a lot of treatment in between, and then they might look back after that, like some years later, and go, oh wow, you know, because that happened to me. I was like, wow. Like when I was in therapy and really getting into recovery, and then, you know, working forward toward the recovery that I did get through fully, then I would suddenly look back on situations and think, wow. And it was mostly friends, because I didn't have that many relationships. Like I was in a 13-year long relationship, so for what that was worth, but I wasn't, you know. But the thing was, then I would look back when I learned so much more and found myself. So no, it's unlikely. And I think that so even after devaluation, and if they ghost you in a devaluation split, which so many more these days do, I don't know, we have to, you know, I mean, I've seen some people with BP, I have some clients with BP who have explained it somewhat to me, but it doesn't really make rational sense, but it's what they do these days. They just want to abandon someone else because they're so sure they're going to be abandoned, largely. I think it's still the way that goes. But, so, no matter how the relationship ends, and you go no contact, or they go no contact, so you have to be no contact, no, they're unlikely to remember how you really were, not without a lot of therapy, or that you were kind to them. No, because generally, some of them, it's out of sight, out of mind, the last person they were with, or anybody that was close that they ghost or they cut off from. And the other thing is that you're usually moving on down the road to the next person. They get all ensconced in what's going on with that, and it's just repetition, compulsion cycles, and they don't have any self, they don't have the emotional intelligence, they don't have the emotional growth yet to be able to really change any of that. Elle said, oh yes, that's cool, yes. I mean, it was really hot, but, you know. Now, yes, I've seen that in people I work with. Some of them are straight to the point, business only. So are you telling the difference between when that's what they're doing versus if they are angry or have a more, I forget how you put it, like cold tone or something? Like, I wonder if there's a difference, or if maybe some people where you work just tend to really sound angry a lot sometimes. Which doesn't mean it's personal, right? But could be just be their style, which wouldn't be so pleasant to be around, but, you know, doable, I think. Yeah, it's still pretty warm up here too, but I think we lost a little bit of humidity. Ellie said, good question, AJ. I'm not even exactly sure why that is. I guess it's because I pick up on what people feel, then what they say, not to bring up on the quote empath, well, because, well, it's not that, I could tell you that, but when people say something nice but have angry or snarky tone, I can pick up on it quickly. But also growing up, I dealt with a lot of that from, yeah, your mother. Well, but the thing about that is, yeah, and because you did, sorry, I just got a chickpea sandwich before, and boy, that's a comedy show right there, but never mind. So what was I going to say about that? Yeah, so you would have a sensitivity to that, and maybe an oversensitivity to that, because when you have a cluster B mother or parent, that can happen for sure too. And the other thing is, people with BP tend to, and that might be one of the reasons, right? Like in your case, Allie, in many people's cases, but they tend to really pick up on tone, and then take personally that tone. So, like which is understandable with your mother, right? But with other people, like sometimes people just are having a moment or something, and they might give you a certain kind of tone, but it doesn't mean that we automatically know what that means. Except people with BPD will kind of believe it's personal from other people, and that it means it's something negative towards you. And the conditioning of how things have been with your mother could well explain that for you and for a lot of people with BPD in the 75% versus the 25%. So, But you see, this is another thing I would just challenge a little bit, Allie, with you and specifically, but generally speaking with people with BPD, is that picking up on other people's feelings. Yes, people with BPD can be correct about that to a degree, but it's not like a clear pickup of other people's feelings without some cognitive distortions, and possibility for more in there. So that can also be troubling. Hey there, Robert. I've tried the best I could with my boss friend, but I think I got devalued. I can't be the steward to his dream that he wants. Well, why should that should never be your responsibility in the first place? Yeah. Sorry, itchy nose now. Allie said, yes, exactly, AJ. I take it personally, but I'm working on that. Well, yeah, no, I know you're pretty aware. That's a good thing you are working on that. And Natalie, feels similar to Allie. I have an oversensitivity to someone's tone, taking it personal, not always, but a lot of the time. Yeah, and I wonder, Natalie, do you think that from what you said about your parents in the past, that you might be in the 25% of people with BPD versus the 75%? Because that's just, if you do believe that or feel that way about yourself, it's interesting then to look at Allie, who would fit in the 75%, you that I believe, and I wonder what you think, fit in the 25%, and yet things are taken sometimes oversensitivity and very personally. So it's not just to do with adverse childhood experience of the 75%, but then the perception in 25%, I guess, it's really, all these things get parsed about BPD with the words either real or perceived, right? So perception, makes things real for people too. That was probably clear as mud. Robert, being devalued at work doesn't have great prospects. Well, no, especially, when you get devalued by a boss, no, it doesn't. But there's only, and a lot of people try so hard, as I know I don't have to tell you. In places where they work, you want to keep working there, and you try to do everything you can to be accommodating, which, that's still a little bit of codependency, but I guess the thing that I would say, and I'm sure it's really harder in this world now, it was never easy before, but this is where people have to kind of start looking for another job, because if you can find another one before you have to quit that one, that's always the best way to go about it. But it kind of is a deal breaker, even in a job. It's kind of like you need to start looking elsewhere. And hopefully you'll have the time to find something else before either they devalue you so much that they tell you to leave, but it's healthy for you to not be in a codependent place, thinking about staying there, trying to make it work any longer than you have to, kind of thing. And this comes up so much, like for people in university, or for people in jobs. Like, it's not always interpersonal, right? And it's just as difficult. Maybe more so in some ways. Allie, I think you're right about that. It's more perceiving than actuality. But at times I do get hurt easily. It can become a perception, but I think for you it was adverse childhood experience first and foremostly, right? As opposed to the 25% of perceived that, but it doesn't matter. It's just as real, whether perceived or actual. And then you said, I've been working on trying to think about it before acting. I still slip sometimes, but I'm much better at it than I was before. Well, and what do you think is helping with you with that? I mean, if you'd care to share that, because that might really help people. Maybe somebody here, or maybe somebody that will be, because people are here listening, or maybe somebody that will listen back. If what's helping you with that. Man, it's drying here tonight. Robert said, excuse me. Yeah, I asked him about health benefits, and he started belittling me like his wife does to him. So I'm looking and found some better options. Oh, good. Hopefully one of those will come through for you soon. Yes. So nice to know that you're being proactive that way. So that means that that's definitely not staying in a codependent, kind of mindset. That's a proactive mindset. That's great. I'm sorry to hear what happened, though. Now, I was thinking I was in the 25% because my parents are very loving. But I do remember hearing them fight at night when they thought I was asleep. But I'm not so sure. Maybe you mean you're not so sure how you're remembering things. But yeah, no, I just, from everything you've shared in live streams, it seems like you would fit in the 25%. And the only reason I mentioned that is because Allie would more sort of fit in the 75%. And what I mean by that is the people with BPD that, it's perception based, that becomes real to them, versus the 75% where there is that adverse childhood experience from a parent or parents. So, and then the interesting thing is, even though one of you is from the 75% and one is from the 25%, you're really relating to each other here with some of the struggles that you've been through and a few things you've said here. So that was really why I was sort of asking that, because, and I think in a couple of your comments on the channel too, Natalie, you might have mentioned that you check things out with your parents and, they're very cooperative, etc. So yeah, I mean, something there was perceived by you and very difficult for you, but that, yeah, would put you in the 25%. And Deborah said, I'm sensitive to tones. Observe, don't absorb is the best practice. Well, yeah, and also learning about what the sensitivity to tones might be about would be the ultimate goal, because then you don't just have to do the observing and not absorbing part, and maybe trying to figure it out later, or maybe you don't do that. Maybe not everybody cares after, but I mean, there are just some tones out there that are not respectful and they're not okay, but then it depends if it's a boss that's got the tone, or a friend, or if it's something you can assert yourself about or not as well. Hey there, Clover Sale. I'm creating a life where I can be close to my, quote, my narc, unquote, so that he can see me when he wants and I can leave whenever he gets unbearable. I'm having a hard time cutting him out of my life. Well, yeah, and I mean, I don't know if well, I think you did say once before that you had a month of therapy and it didn't work, or was that somebody else? I'm not sure. But yeah, I think you need to look at therapy again as a route, because you're not looking out for your own best interest there, but you might not realize that, Cutting him out of your life would be the most difficult thing to do, but it would be the healthiest thing to do. And even though you have BPD, you deserve to do the healthiest thing for yourself. But then, yes, you have to be able to cope with it. But then again, if you don't do that for yourself, you're going to have to cope with him being really rotten to you. Oh, Allie said, okay, sure, anything if it helps others. What I do is, instead of acting on what I'm feeling right at the moment, I pause and try to think of other times I reacted quickly. It's very hard though. Well, yeah, that pause is a really huge thing. That's great. And that's mindfulness awareness, right? That you can do that pause. And Robert, usually I'm not proactive, but this time I'm working on my codependency and avoidance. Well, that's good. And I mean, that's something that people with codependency, like I'm always talking about, the healing and recovery journey. And I know how I work with clients. I know how every other person does that with clients. But it's so important to really take that full recovery and healing journey, because, like you said, you're not always that proactive. But wouldn't it be cool to find your way to always being that proactive? Because it's the healthiest way that we can really be. And I'm a little far away. Well, I gotta watch it because of the camera. But I'm just, that print's too small and it's all white on black. And Roller Girl is saying yes to Clover. So I don't know if you have similar experience or not. I hope not, because people with BPD shouldn't be with people with NPD. It's all in what is good for you. Yeah, but what's good for Clover Sale is not the choices that she's making, or he or she is making right now. But maybe, you know, I mean, easy for me to say that. Maybe they're not aware of that. Or maybe it's sort of like the lesser of two evils, so to speak. And I'm not calling the narc evil, I'm just saying, choice-wise. Well, yeah, Roller Girl, until Clover wants to do something different, but I don't think it's about want. It's about being able to cope with something different. Allie, I try to think is this really happening? And I've had bad experiences with this person. Have I had bad experiences with this person before? Why am I reacting this way? I try to see it if it's legit reason for if there's a legit reason for it or something else. Well, yes, that's excellent. That's an excellent process to follow through on. And Roller Girl, build you up, and there will be less on your mind about him. Well, actually, Roller Girl, I don't know how anybody with BPD can build themselves up when they're not only in a relationship where the narc is no longer in contact with them at the moment, but they need therapy. You know, people need therapy. They can't just build themselves up. Karen, hey there. To Clover, you need to, yes, that's what I'm saying. You need to go, quote, no contact, unquote, totally. You're prolonging your pain, and this will not end well for you. Yes, very, very wise words, Karen, and I totally agree with you. Roller Girl, this is cool. That is cool to be proactive. Yes, and that's what Clover needs to do right now too, but it might be a lot more difficult. And Clover said, I know, Karen. I know he's bad, but I like this. I like his good side. Now, yeah, you're unlikely to ever see that again, or more than momentarily. Like, as I explained in another live stream, if he ever does come back, he will only come back when there is no other supply at a given moment, and that means you're just, you know, it's like dehumanizing the way that the narc will treat you. It's not like it is dehumanizing. Wills, I don't know if this helps, but when I'm dealing with conflict or uncomfortable situations outside of a narc, I remind myself that people I'm dealing with are not always narcs, and they are likely, more to come. Roller Girl. Yeah, well, therapy would rather be imperative, you know, for people with BPD. Okay, what was that now? You realize people that you're dealing with are not always narcs, and there are likely other explanations for tone or whatever may be bothering me. Then I give myself time to figure out what I'm feeling and why. It gets easier with time. Yes. And the more people investigate that and understand that for themselves, then the more you can, fall back on that experience and that growing and learning, and then be able to tell kind of the difference between someone who's. But you have to realize too, if somebody's tone is really disrespectful or worse, that's still not okay too, even if they're not a narcissist or anything. Allie, that's what I do with my mom when she's awful to me. I keep reminding myself she's not right up there. Well, yeah, but she's there's no excuse for it either, though, right? Karen to Clover, like my BPD's good side too, but she literally yes to me with emotional yes, and it took me 3 years to recover, and I'm still not recovered. Yes, well, that and the difficulties and everything else that goes along with it. Yeah, it's not worth it. And of course, people have a hard time getting out of it, but when people, it's never going to be easy, so people really just have to make that decision for themselves. It's very, very difficult. And that's another thing too, like I think I mentioned in the video I did earlier, that people with BPD can have good qualities, but they're not in the emotional intelligence relationship area. They might be nice sometimes. They might be intelligent. They might be creative. But it's not that they have strengths in relational or relationship or emotional intelligence areas. So they can have other positive traits, but it's not enough to keep abandoning yourself to them for, because they need so much therapy to figure stuff out. Roller Girl said, my boyfriend has BPD, NPD. Therapy is helping him. Therapy is helping me too. Well, that's good, because, perhaps he's really engaged in it, and if you're really engaged in your therapy, BPD, NPD, though, is complex to treat, and results can vary, but some people can get through it. No, I hear you, Karen, that you're not totally recovered. Yeah, it takes a while, but how difficult was that? Was your decision, or if you weren't ghosted, to finally go no contact? Because it never feels right. Like, people don't I'm so ready now. It's not that simple. Allie, no, it definitely is not an excuse, AJ. I just meant it helps me to not take what she's saying personally. Well, yeah, sure, of course, I hear you. Yeah, that's excellent. And Karen said, when we went to couples and single therapy, but she didn't keep her appointments. Nothing worked. No contact works. Trust me. I know it's so hard, but you'll get there if you take a stand for your own well-being. Yes, well said, Karen, because you see, it's not unless people go no contact, which is taking the more difficult route for sure, that you can actually start to really learn and grow, because you need to get them out of your life first. You need to put yourself first. Clover Sale, do you think BPDs are psychopaths? No, they're not. Yeah, well, I guess we said it about the same time, or you might have typed it before I said it, Karen, but that's fine. No, it's that crazy American, I won't do the whole thing, I promise. Pseudoscience of psychiatry, based on a flimsy study. I've read it, I've seen it, it is flimsy. And no scientific proof at all, and they've now proclaimed, quote, that, I guess not in all, but in some, BPD is a female variant of ASPD, unquote. And now they have diagnosed people with women, I'm sorry, it doesn't apply to men for some crazy reason. They've diagnosed women with BPD subtype ASPD, which is, to me, it's inane. It's beyond, it's a pseudoscience of psychiatry showing their total incompetence, actually, is what it is. And why would they say it's just a female variant? What happened to the guys? Or are they already too, miffed that there are more male psychopaths than, and there aren't that many females, but there's a percentage, but they want to run them through a BPD diagnosis first. Gee, I wonder why. Oh. Allie, no contact all the way. That's what I'm doing when I move out. I know, I'm so excited about that for you, Allie. I look at it kind of like recovering from a drug or alcohol. You got to do cold turkey. Well, yes, but if you're on a psychiatric med, don't do cold turkey. I finally watched that interview, Jordan Peterson and his daughter, last night, and he's had some complications that just horrific from psychiatric med, or a couple meds, and not everybody gets the same kind, and not everybody will react the same or have the same things happen as he's had happen, but they are dangerous. So I was just going to say, don't go cold turkey from psych med. You can go psych meds, you can go cold turkey from, well, going cold turkey from alcohol would be pretty hard too. You should get into treatment. But you can go cold turkey. It's still hard, but from the person with BPD or NPD, or like in Allie's case, who's getting through BPD, having an NPD mother. And Will said that's true. Some people are just disrespectful. Either way, I just try to process, and then I can just let it go. Especially if it's not someone I have to deal with often. Yes. And I think the other thing too, I find for myself, unless I don't listen to my gut instinct and I start to double think something, which I realize never is helpful. I mean, sometimes you have to give something some more thought, or think about it, like for a time. But when somebody is disrespectful, etc., to me, and more so, increasingly with every day of my life, and for quite a while. But I don't care why, and I don't need to parse why. I just pick up that piece, and I trust myself enough, and then it depends who it is, what it is, how outrageous it is or not, and whether it would be helpful to say something, or whether it just, you end whatever's going on at that moment in time. It's hard to say. So many different situations. Oh, I'm sorry. What did I miss there, Allie? Oh, yeah, okay. Well, no, I realized it could have been a metaphor, but I just had to say what I had to say, because it's not the best metaphor to use in that case, I guess one could say, because people on psych meds, for sure, drugs in general, or alcohol, shouldn't go cold turkey. So, yeah. But often, from relationships with, like, a cluster B parent, or somebody with BPD who's not having any treatment, or whatever the case, people do have to go no contact cold turkey. And then there will be a different kind of withdrawal, but one that is psychologically painful, but it's not going to affect your physiology in terms of, cold turkey from those things in your metaphor, Allie. And he said, I agree completely, AJ. When I was younger, I'd forgive people easily, but if someone disrespects me, I cut them out right away. No. No, it's okay. You don't have to apologize. It gave me the opportunity to just reiterate what I said, which I think is important people keep in mind, And Robert said, I noticed my boss is grandiose and callous when things inconvenience him. I explained my nephews can get dangerously sick, but he hates I practice safety. Yeah, well, that's a little odd that he hates that, don't you think? Because, I think it's pretty important to, pay attention to what people are doing, and safety can be part of that, and, yeah, for sure. And it sounds like from what you said earlier, Robert, too, that not only does he have his own problems, but if the wife is around, it gets worse. But that's still no excuse. Wheels, when I'm dealing with psycho, I remind myself that I can't put logic where there is none. The only way to win is not to play with these people. It's very true. Because, people who've been in these relationships, and then, like with a person with BPD, for example, and whether they get ghosted or they finally go no contact, they end the relationship. As hard as that is, it's incredibly difficult. Then they have to remind themselves that everything that's ruminated over, all the what ifs, the if onlys, the woulda, coulda, shouldas, which are all thought distortions, etc., but that people will go through after a breakup with somebody with BPD or a narcissist. Could I have done something differently? Could I have not? Etc. It's important to know that, what was I going to say? That there is no logic to it all. And that all that ruminating and all what I just mentioned amounts to a search for closure. Like logical closure, which you can get in your own healing and recovery journey after you go no contact and down the road, but you're never going to get it from them or with them. Sarah, hey there. I can't wish to be hoovered. I can't wish to be hoovered or contacted. Sometimes, like, maybe, sometimes the pain loss feels overwhelming. Maybe you mean you do. You can wish to be hoovered or contacted. I'm not sure. And then Allie said, I just think cold turkey is the best way for no contact. I mean, these people never change. Well, yes, in that realm, it is the best way. Still hurts and it's difficult, but it doesn't have the, it's not unsafe in the manner of the metaphor you used. Albert, do BPD lie a lot? Well, this varies because not all people with BPD are the same, but yes, it's quite common for them to lie a lot. There's no justifying it, but just to explain it, often it's to get out of responsibility, accountability, as protection, but that doesn't make it right. And Sarah said, I know each time he contacts me, I hope it's different, but it's always the same cycle. And you said, yeah, sorry, I meant I wish I was hoovered and he reached out. Well, it sounds like you have been before, though, from your previous statement, if I'm following you. That you said, each time he contacts me, I hope it's different, but it's always the same cycle. Which, I know it's emotionally difficult, but logically you need to remember and be very mindful that you probably, if you haven't already, you need to cut the avenue of contact that he had or has left, because it's always gonna throw you backward a bit for a loop, and nothing is gonna change. And when you keep hoping that you might get a Hoover that will be different, then it's like you got the back door open, and so you can't really keep moving forward in your healing recovery, same as if you close that door, which is difficult to do. Robert, that's why I wonder if he has BPD. When they fight, his disrespect becomes unrestrained. Well, yeah, that's one big red flag for sure. Allie, I know it's going to hurt at least some, but pushing the feelings I feel towards my mom in any way does help me to get away. Well, yes, and maybe after you get away and you are no contact, there may still be some grief there, but you can get through that, and that's usually the case for most people. It's part of that recovery on the other side of no contact when you actually don't have to be where they are. And Sarah, yes, I have been. I haven't seen him in 2 years, but he messages me every few months. Then I'm back to day one of pain. Oh, so, I mean, have you been able to close the avenue of contact yet? Because you're not no contact until they really can't contact you. And I'm sorry to hear that, because, there's something there that you're still hanging on to, right, that is really painful, understandable, but painful to let go of, but will really help you to let go of it. Like, it'll hurt, but it will help your recovery in overall. And so it's like being mostly no contact, but not entirely. And no contact needs to be something that has entirety to it, right? Best for people to heal and recover. Robert, I was codependent and thought he was, yes, being treated really badly. I'm just trying to watch out for the AI. Probably won't help. But they got therapy and found she was a variant of bipolar. Now, what on earth does that mean? And I'm not saying that directly at you, Robert, but what's a variant of bipolar mean? I really don't know. He doesn't care, and I even looked it up for him. Wow. A variant of bipolar. I hope you'll add, Robert, what is that? Sarah, and I'm sorry to hear what you're going through with this boss, because, yeah, it just sounds impossible. Sarah, I'm working my way up to blocking him. It's really hard. I feel like I'm letting him down. Yeah, I mean, that's obviously got to do with codependency, but how are you working your way up? I mean, if you can say generally, because usually people can't really work their way up to blocking someone. It is really hard, absolutely. But you said you feel like you're letting him down. So your focus still goes more back to him at that point around this part of, full no contact, instead of thinking of you first. I wonder, you don't have to answer me, but I wonder what's happening there for you. And no judgment. I don't mean any judgment with that. Oh, you're very welcome, Allie. And yes, it's good that it helps you to keep pushing through. Definitely. And Wheels, yeah, the struggle for me, I like to understand the why of everything, but there's no real answers with narcs. Well, yeah, and sometimes why is a question that can be answered or better understood or entertained and dealt with way further down the road. Robert, oh yes, my favorite word that I know what it means but I can't say it. I always mispronounce some things. Like they don't full spike into mania and depression, they have grandiosity too. Yeah, well, I wonder how that stands apart from bipolar 2 now. You see, all these little gradations they're putting in that to me seem way not necessary, and otherwise agendaed. But Robert, it's like a bipolar light, laugh out loud. Well, yeah, sure, it doesn't help too much, right? But that's interesting. No, I have heard of that, but I'm not really up on my bipolar. No, I don't have bipolar, but I mean, because sometimes I have to look into it, for a client or something I'm working with, but then I forget it again. And it probably goes back to the fact that a person I was with, it was a good relationship, etc. Many years ago, was bipolar. I never knew what was. I never understood it. Sarah, I used to be chasing him and still contacting him. Then I stopped. Then he started messaging me, and we were repeating cycles of push-pull. Now I finally understand BPD, so it's easier for me to let go. Oh, okay, cool. Well, so now you just maybe need to take that action of make it a full no contact. That won't be easy, but if it's easier to let go, then you get that one other part to let go of. And Allie, totally, 2 wheels, yes. And Albert, what if I cut the word, what if she cut the word fool into their arm? How bad is that state of mind? If she cut the word fool into their arm. Oh, did she? I'm going to assume, unless that, correct me if I'm wrong, she cut the word. So in other words, she was cutting herself and made the word fool on her own arm. I think that's what you're saying. Well, it's a self-sabotaging, without a sense of self for a person with BPD, self-loathing, self-hating, the shame that goes along with the abandonment wound, etc. That's the state of mind. It's not even coming from a state of mind. It's coming from emotions that they can't stand or feel, but it is negative, self-sabotaging and wounding behavior on their part, because it does indicate how little they think of themselves. Even though they don't know themselves, they are entirely negative toward themselves in doing something like that. Robert, since I helped uncover that she had a mental illness, they both kind of turned on me. Yeah, that can do it, Robert, unfortunately. It's like, no good deed goes unpunished with people with issues, You said, I thought she was a narc, but she gets in manic spins. She's a narc with mania to me. Makes sense. Oh, okay, so I got that right, Albert. Well, I just explained as best I could. I mean, it's not a state of mind. It's a state of unregulated emotion she can't deal with, tolerate, cope with. And she might not know herself, but she does not like herself, in using herself loosely, right? She's turned her adverse childhood experience, now she's punishing herself because of the shame wound that she feels bad. right? Like she is bad. I mean, she may feel bad too, but she feels like she is bad. And what that is about is that people interject really, adverse, kind of like over the top, really horrible parents. They interject a narrative because of the shame and trying to still get from the parent, emotional needs met. So they take it on and they take it inside themselves, and it becomes a major part of the inner critic. And they just, it's self-hatred. But in people with BPD at ground zero, it's self-hatred of a self that isn't there. Wheels, is it normal for a situation like mine to make someone kind of afraid of people? Oh, definitely. Definitely. Like, whenever anybody's been through that kind of adverse experience, there's, and then when you're working through the codependency as well, you're afraid that you'll either overgive or, you're still working out who's trustworthy and who isn't, right? Like when you meet people, and it's not uncommon to have other experiences where you might give someone some trust, and then they haven't deserved it or earned it. So, yeah, it is really normal as you're working through all this to be afraid of other people. Yes, because you've been so hurt. And it's actually it's unfortunate that it has to go that way, but it's the best way to protect yourself for now until you can get out of there and you are no contact and you've developed at least one other person that you can trust, and you start to develop more self-trust, though you have some self-trust now. But I think, anyways, the answer is yes, definitely. And Ellie, I think so, definitely. I have a hard time trusting other people. Well, yes, and that comes along with, but it's the adverse experience that you've had that is in a way similar, yet in ways different from Wheels, but the narc parent. So it's but it's also, so it can happen for somebody who's had that adverse experience in their life with a cluster B parent, and they have codependency, or in your case where you have BPD but you're doing really well with that. So it's kind of a double whammy in your case, Ellie. Is what I'm saying is that not trusting others can be from your mother, yes, but can also be from the effects of that. And ask yourself, where are you at with the BPD recovery in terms of trusting? So, but they kind of overlap, those two things that people are challenged by when you have a cluster B mother and you have BPD, but you are working your way out of that. For freedom, the thing about marking yourself, it's like tattooing yourself. I think people tattoo themselves often because they lack something permanent in their life because they didn't get it as children. Well, yes, and I would say that somebody self-harming and somebody getting a tattoo are, on the one hand, wholly two different things. On the other hand, can be overlappingly similar things. Because, I don't know, but I've never got a tattoo. But I hear it can be quite painful, and of course, depending where you're getting it, I guess even more painful. So, for some people, they may well self-harm as well, but with BPD or whatever, they may well self-harm as well, but then getting tattoos is another way of sort of that same kind of feeling of kind of harm, but not doing it to oneself. Now, I'm not saying that it's harm, inducing to get a tattoo, but there might be something to that, and I don't know, but it's really about the permanence of it. I think also it could be, but I think also a lot of people with BPD getting a lot of tattoos, not everybody does, but a lot of them do, especially nowadays, younger, etc. And I think it's really a way of hiding and trying to be more invisible. Visible as heck, but invisible too. I think there's a lot of implications to why people with BPD in particular, or even narcissistic personality disorder, would get so many tattoos. But that could be one reason, for sure. I just think there might be many others as well. I'm not ruling that out at all. And Alice said, I know it's hard to tell, but I think I have at least made enough progress to be able to tell the differences, but I still do struggle with it, for sure. Well, yeah, and I mean, just be aware of the part of that in the woundedness of having BPD that might be just a little different from, but it probably overlaps with, you know, I mean, probably wouldn't have BPD if you didn't have that narc mother, so yeah, it probably overlaps. Natalie, I have a hard time trusting people also. My mother was overprotective. I'm pretty sure that has something to do with it. Well, yes, it could well. And if your mother was overprotective, can't say for sure, only you would know, but maybe that meant she was a little on the nervous side. Maybe that meant, and if that's the case, but even being overprotective for whatever reasons, and however she made you aware that she was being overprotective at whatever age you realized, or if she said so, that kind of reaction from a parent can really scare a child, you know. So that can become an adverse experience that your mother never meant for you to have, obviously. Albert, will someone with BPD ever feel or understand the hurt they put onto people that love them? Really, I don't think so for most, but not me. I can't say all. But unless they get really in, you know, far down the road in recovery. Some people might intellectually have the self-awareness, but a lot of people with BPD, and especially untreated, no. And then they might not ever get enough treatment. So often the answer is, it depends on whether they get enough treatment or not. And sometimes the answer for some people with BPD out there is no, they won't ever really get that. So, because they don't get it in the here and now, right? So, and that can change. But many people with BPD, or who might have BPD or undiagnosed even right now, unfortunately, a lot of them just aren't going to seek help at all. And they're not aware of what they're doing to others, which doesn't excuse it. But yeah, they may never take personal responsibility for it, and that's a really difficult thing to hear. So, but it varies widely across people with BPD. Natalie, I relate to the self-harm, tattoos, piercings, etc. I've done most of that. I did it just trying to get a different feeling, hopefully of joy for a moment. Oh, that's interesting, because I was thinking, so yeah, I hear you on that. And then I don't know how you felt about the tattoo. Were you hoping maybe it would continue to be a source of joy? And then the other thing is, what was I going to say about that? That piercings and or tattoos, trying to get a different feeling. That could be why some people can't stop getting tattoos, I guess, because but there's still a lot of moving pieces in that. Not necessarily for you, Natalie, but for a lot of people with BPD. And what's that different feeling that they're seeking? So maybe a lot of people with BPD also get tattoos because, or piercings, etc., because, yeah, it's an externalization out. They're trying to feel better from something that is somewhat external. We need to stop saying Wheels, thanks for that. This whole time, I just said again. This whole time I thought I was just over dramatic or playing the victim. No, I always feel like I'm walking around with a target on my back. Well, because you pretty much are, right? You pretty much always have been, and that's not your fault or responsibility. Allie, self-harm is something I used to struggle with a lot. I still do with impulses like getting piercings on the spur of the moment. And I used to have an eating disorder, but I've gotten much better with it. Well, that's good. Just keep working on that. And Karen said, how I went no contact is, it was the last push away. The emotional beatdowns. I left her with, then hoovered her, broke up again, then she hoovered back, went to visit her for closure, and at that visit, I really got that I had to go no contact. Yeah, well, I'm really sorry to hear that because I'm sure, at that visit that was very, very painful. But it is good that, for you and for your sake that you were able to then go, wow, whatever was about the last visit, it was like the last straw for you. So, still doesn't make it easy or make it less painful, but at least you got to where you needed to get to and then continue on your journey, right? As I'm sure you are. And Natalie said, wow, that's true, AJ. I know I was probably around 8 years old when she wouldn't let me join Girl Scouts. Yeah, mine wouldn't either. Quote, because there's bad people in the world, unquote. But I thought that was normal. Well, no, it sounds like your mother was a little anxious, to say the least, right? Like, overly anxious, overly worried. And so her fears not only affected you, but maybe you didn't pick up on them. But I know my mother, who was, BPD, NPD, was like that. And definitely, like, if she would have these meltdown things, and she would all of a sudden be, like, I guess, totally unsafe, but she wasn't a feeling person. But she'd be freaking out. And when I was a kid, if she freaked out like that, then my whole world, like, I did, it was like, if I had a 1/4 inch of emotional safety back then as a kid, her freaking out took that away and I had nothing left. So we all get affected differently by parents to that regard, I think. To Albert, when I hurt people in the past, I never understood their pain. But not because I wanted to hurt them. I just didn't think I was that big of a deal that someone would be hurt if I left. Yes, that's interesting. Yes, because often, people with BPD, if they don't know themselves, etc., and you don't know how you're affecting the other person, and you could be feeling so badly from what happened to you in your childhood and all that shame, that's, thank you for sharing that, Elle. That, I think, is very helpful. I know it's very helpful, actually. It's very insightful. Karen, it's like she flipped a switch, was a different person at our last visit, totally cold, and triangulated with talk of a distant lover. It made me see how truly damaged she was. Well, I'm really sorry to hear that you had to go through that, but yes, definitely when you knew what you found out there, I'm really glad that you took care of yourself. I'm so sorry that you had to go through that, though. Ellie, do you think us with BPD, we associate love or good feelings with pain? It can be for some people. And also, for a lot of people with BPD, it's associating love with, it can just be triggering because, when you have that cluster B mom who doesn't really love you, then that wound and all that's involved in that woundedness, with the shame of it all, people still feel like I'm bad or I'm unworthy. It doesn't mean you are. It just means people feel I'm bad, I'm unworthy, I'm not worthy of somebody being nice to me, somebody loving me. So people with BPD, and you might still be just kind of in that region where you're moving through things, Allie, but people often can't accept. They don't know what to do with a compliment. They don't know what to do with somebody saying I love you. It's very, very scary. Because, I think you're right. It would be that association to the pain of, the cluster B parent often, that many with BPD have, that might have said I love you one time and never meant it, right? Never showed it. So, that you raise a good point there. I think sometimes there's more to it than that, but I think that could be at the heart of it. For many. And you said to Elle, I can and do relate to that. That's exactly how I feel during those times. Will, Psycho told me I was uneasy, for that, those types, and that no one would ever really want me, among other things. Yeah, wow. This is stuff I was hearing constantly by age 11, and it stuck with it. Well, yes, it sticks with kids. Like, I know you're not a kid now, but it sticks with kids, right? We've all heard, well, I mean, those of us with an ART parent, I had 2 of them, comorbid, just to not say the whole thing. But yes, no, I just want to validate for you that they always say that kind of thing, because they're really trying to break you down, right? And they don't want you to have any confidence, and they don't want you to feel good about yourself, and they don't want you to believe in yourself. And they're also, so they're aiming that at you, rather sadistically and also for supply, but at the same time they're projecting out, what they've been through as well, which is just all stinks. And I'm sorry that happened to you. Thanks so much, AJ, because I have struggled with those feelings back and forth at times. That's, yeah, and you said that's awful. Yes, it is awful for what Wheels has been through. And I think, but in your own way, Alan, you've been through something, Wheels is in a different situation, but you went through and still are putting up with a parent that maybe isn't quite as dastardly as his, but same variety, right? So, yeah, they don't, they actually don't have, these narcs, any emotional safety, but they really don't know that because they're not attuned emotionally to self or other or anything. And they often don't, and I don't know about, the experience of people here with a narcissist parent, but I know mine were like the NPD, BP, NPD mother, dark triad father, were very much not okay with feelings at all. Other people's feelings, good, bad, indifferent, whatever. No, don't want to deal with that. And they were always dumping, well, not really their feelings, but dumping. See, narcissists need supply to put something in the black space between where they're aware and because they're totally living through a false self. And then they have the labyrinth of defense mechanisms between that dark hole. People often refer to it in their stomach for some reason. But that dark hole inside, and then all those defenses, and where that arrested emotionally developed lost self is in the narcissist. But they're not going to, usually they never, they're so busy just getting supply to try to fill the dark hole, to not experience the agitation or whatever else they might experience with that. I don't want to ascribe too many feelings to it because I don't usually feel that many feelings about it. And so they're always just inserting something between, the false self is gathering the supply to make sure that lost self in the narcissist never gets found, for lack of a better way to put it. And Robert said, I felt that one, Wheels. Your brother became your inner critic. Yes, Wheels is really a good soul, yes. And I think I remember you talking about that some time ago, Robert, yes. And because it's whoever is treating people the worst, sometimes it can be a sibling over a parent, for sure. I'm so sorry that happened to you, though. Allie, my mom is very emotional and mentally abusive. Emotionally and mentally abusive, yes. I need to lock myself away from her to keep my sanity. That's quite understandable. I'm sorry to hear that, though. Wheels, then I'd hear, quote, no one will ever love you like I do. Oh, yeah. No one will have your back like I do. Your friends will turn their backs on you, so you better be careful what you say and think about us, unquote. Yeah, I know. I just want to validate, Wheels. I'm so sorry that's your experience because I went through a lot of that too. And then, we had different situations. So, I could literally physically get away from them at times. And I would take off, and in the summer I'd take off. If it was winter, I'd still just leave the house. But yeah, I heard that all the time. I heard things like, quote, you're never going to amount to anything, unquote. I can't remember them all now, but all those kind of statements. Except I never, in all fairness, my parents never said what your psycho mother has said. They never said that nobody will love you like I do or we do. No, because that's extra special gaslighting, that one. My parents couldn't even pull that one off, but I'm glad, because guess what? That's really extra wounding. Sorry to say. And, Robert, sorry about the AI. I'll work on it. No, that's okay. Sometimes I'm not careful at all, and sometimes I'm trying to be a little careful. And whatnot. But it's not a big deal really. And Allie said to Wheels, I'm so sorry you went through that. Yes, I just heard very similar things through my mom in that last argument we had. And no, nobody does deserve to be treated that way at all. And I must say, and I'm much older than you guys, but I mean, and millions of other people, when we have these kind of parents, we've heard that stuff. But when we're growing up and we're hearing it and we're taking it in, yes. And then we believe it because we don't know what it is. And we also don't know that there are other parents out there not doing that to their kids, because unfortunately whatever we experience in our own family of origin, even when it's horrible, it's the only quote normal that we know, which is horrible. And we said, thanks all, I appreciate the support. I'm so glad you're keeping sane and getting out. Yes, Allie is doing a good job of that. And you're working hard to do that for yourself too, Wheels. And so, but yeah, it's interesting because, you know, people with BP on the stream now tonight are, you know, they're pretty self-aware and they're working through, you know, different aspects of things that they still need to work out. And so that's an example that if so many other people, they are an example, that if so many other people would just start in treatment and like work at things, but so many won't make that choice. And so that's where the emotional and the relational collision is going to happen, because yeah, people with codependency are going to overgive too much, and people with BPD or NPD are just going to, not all, but many like at this stage, at ground zero, are just going to take. And then, like, there's been a couple questions tonight about will they understand what they did, or will, and you know, some people do, but like by that time, like, you're already hurt, you're already decimated, and whether they get it later or not, that's not really going to help you out. So people with codependency have to get into their own healing recovery journeys, and going no contact is the most difficult choice. Feels impossible. One can never be ready for it. And it's important to stress again that it is a kind of cold turkey proposition. And then you can grow and realize so much more after that, though it will be painful too. But not going full no contact from an ex with BPD, or, you know, once you're divorced, or, you know, even a parent with BPD or a narcissistic parent in people's lives, it's going to block some of your recovery, or large portions of your attempts at recovery. And for freedom, I was just going to say, it's nice to see BPDs coming here and being honest. Well, yes, because when people are aware, and if they've had therapy, they've learned however they've learned as well. Yeah, like, many people come to live streams with BPD here, and they are really honest. And even Clover, I don't know if Clover's still here, but, you know, struggling with trying to deal with and wanting to stay in a relationship with a narcissist who isn't even giving her well, I guess him or her, I should say, the time of day still. And what people with BPD go through, and the flippant way that other YouTubers and people online will talk about people, you know, like the only person that a person with BPD could ever stay with is a narcissist. That's like worse than a Mr. Magoo cartoon. What is that line? Because it's not, that people with BPD can end up with narcissists, but that's not a good thing for them. And then the other thing I've heard out there is that, the quiet borderline will just, you know, have the narcissist for lunch. No, these are all people that conflate things, you know, that either make up things, don't understand a whole lot of anything in particular, or that think that somebody with BPD is going to somehow be worse than a narcissist. It is not true. People that have BPD that are with narcissists are going to get as wounded by that and then some as would anybody without any cluster B, you know, like, it's just nonsensical to me. And so, yeah, I mean, I have people on streams a lot with BPD and that are very honest, and I think on the last one as well, and it was really a heartbreaking situation they were in too. But and I think recently to a couple of videos I've done too, that a couple people have commented, but pretty reasonably, you know, and not agreeing with me, but that's okay. about why people with BPD can't love until and unless and all those other qualifiers, right? But the thing is, the vast majority of people with BPD that people are online talking about and hurting over, etc., aren't people like the people here in the stream with BPD, because they aren't taking any responsibility for themselves, or they're still lost in it all. So, and Will said extra special gaslighting. Does this mean my mommy thinks I'm special? No, well, I think you know the answer to that, right? Because they think, narcs think they're too darn special. So, there's no room for any other special except for their kind of brand of, quote, not really, but like special, unquote, in their ignorance and their grandiosity. Allie, it hurts me when I hear people talking badly about people with BPD, like, we are heartless people. I have had the reaction sometimes from people. I agree, we can act that way when we aren't working, I guess you mean, through it and aware, yeah. Well, and I mean, that's another thing too, that I don't always say in every video, because I don't want to caveat my way through, but I hope everybody knows that, you know, I know there are people out there with BPD that are in various stages of recovery and or getting close to recovery, and then there's a lot out there who talk about this online and stuff, and they're nowhere near recovery, but they think they are. But unlike people here in the stream and other people that have been here in the streams before, or that comment on my channel, you can really tell who's down the road and accepting personal responsibility and knowing themselves better and being more aware with BPD than those who aren't. So we're hearing all the time online about people who are like at ground zero or don't ever go to get help a lot of the time. And then a lot of people, you know, YouTubers and a lot of YouTubers, but I guess people on their blogs or online in general, they just, I don't know, they just think that somehow like a person with quiet BPD is going to overwhelm a narcissist, which is just ridiculous and all that stuff. So, and I think it's interesting too that until recently, sometimes if I get comments from some people with BPD, which they state, I don't try to guess that they have BPD. I don't think that everybody disagrees with me on a video. Like someone said in the last stream, which I might put that whole stream up on my website, because nothing to hide there, right? I think it was in the live stream, because I don't think it was in a comment. Somebody said they thought I was really hostile towards people with BPD, or I got more hostile recently. Not true, but they have the right to their own opinion, right? But I just think it's again the difference of all the people with BPD who are not seeking any treatment and what they're doing in people's lives versus that's not all people with BPD. But the point I was going to make is, up until recently, and there are lots of comments all over videos on my channel, when people with BPD, they tell me they have BPD. I don't just guess. And they really disagree with what I've said in a video where they've commented. But some of them, you know, they do it in a really disrespectful and beyond kind of way. What was my point? Yeah, I mean, there are obviously a lot of commenters, I'm saying, over the years have been in various stages of denial and even recently, like and in a different way, but two people that responded to, you know, my video from a few days ago, that borderlines, you know, don't, can't, and won't love you, and they have not loved you, which wasn't in the title because, you know, there's so much space. Yeah, both commenters asked me. Well, I said, I think you're confusing people with BP with NPD, but no, I'm not. But then again, I'm not trying to say all people with BPD. Oh, that was my thing. Not all people with BPD are alike. My comment I was going to try to make was that when other people, not the most recent comments I just referenced, other people with BPD over time on the channel, the comments are wherever they are under whatever videos, they always say that I'm doing something to all of them. So it's like people with BPD feel like they have, like it's logical or something, or they have the right to say, us, you're making us feel this way, you're stigmatizing BPD, like whatever. It's like, so they fail to communicate in a way that individualizes themselves, which I find rather ironic, and I don't know what else to say about it. So some commenters on the channel have done that, and when I've done a couple videos back to those comments, I always make that point. It's like, I always try to take care, and I hope that people know when I do some stronger videos that are, you know, really accurate to most with untreated BPD, etc. Not everybody with BPD. I hope people know that that's what I mean. But then people with BPD come along, and there hasn't been one recently, so I'm talking months or, you know, last year sometime. They come along and they try to say, oh, you're this against people with BPD. But all of us, they'll use the term all of us. So they are speaking as if all people with BPD are alike. When in fact, I'm not doing that. So I've always found that interesting and also confusing. Natalie said, same here. I would never hurt anyone on purpose. The emotional dysregulation is sometimes too overwhelming. Right, you know, and in all fairness, Natalie, though, you would never want to hurt anyone on purpose. When you get too dysregulated and you are overwhelmed, you can still maybe hurt somebody, though, right? That's what happens for a lot of people with BPD who may be, you know, at ground zero. I'm not saying you're at ground zero. But, so, for a lot of people who get hurt by somebody with BPD, I'm just saying, you know, that, like I've always spoken to this, it's not always intentional, but the other person's still getting hurt. So what they're left with is how hurt they are, and they can't redress it with a lot of people with BPD. They can't talk about it or get any idea of, you know, like they want them to stop hurting them, but, you know, so that's where codependents are sort of getting more invested instead of divesting, right? So I'm just speaking generally there. Albert, when people with BPD treat people bad, reflect how they were treated growing up. It definitely can in a lot of people's cases, and it also reflects how badly they think about themselves because they don't really know themselves. But even having said that, they're still responsible for how badly they hurt other people in many cases. And Allie, no, never, AJ. I think you're realistic about it. It's true, sometimes we have hurt lots of people, and I know I certainly have. It just helps me to push even more harder to work on myself. Well, that's wonderful. I mean, to take that motivation, Allie, that's wonderful. And I think a lot of people with BPD do realize that and do work harder. And then there's the ones out there at ground zero, you know, different, right? But there's a significant percentage of other people with BPD that aren't getting on board with that at all. Al, I felt too worthless to expect anyone being hurt by me. How can anyone be hurt by someone so worthless? I was honestly confused by the fact that I did in fact hurt people I dated. Well, yeah, I hear you, El, and you're more aware now, but yeah, I mean, lots of people with BPD, and you were one of those before, but now you're working on yourself and you have more awareness. Not working on yourself, but working on your healing recovery, and you have more awareness. But that's the thing I'm usually talking about for the people with BPD who aren't aware of that yet. Just like you're saying, there was a time when you weren't aware. And then for people on the other side of the equation getting hurt, it's sort of like they're still getting hurt. You don't have the intent and you don't know, or you didn't know. And people hurting people now who are with them, people with BPD, that are maybe ground zero, no treatment, etc. They don't know either. But the other thing is, and it's why it's really important and great, like in everybody in this live stream with BPD, not everybody in the live stream has BPD, but they're all taking personal responsibility now, and they're aware now that they hurt people. But yes, this is what I'm often speaking to. People with BPD often don't know how others are being affected by them. It doesn't make how they hurt people okay, but the reality is the intent is like rarely in such a small, like 15% of people with BPD, which is a loose 10 to 15%. It's not based on anything. It's just a delineation that I use to say some people with BPD are way more severely impacted, comorbidity, etc., co-occurring disorders, which means a lot of them, not all of them, are never going to realize. And so, but their intent, because I see a lot of people all over online ascribing intent. Now, there are maybe 10% or so, or 15 of people with BPD that might have more intent because they're more severely impacted, other things are going on with them. But for most people with BPD, how other people get really wounded, hurt, and etc., which is not excusable, people with BPD really don't have the intent. And then people get so hurt, people with codependency, and they get so hurt, and they get online and they tell their stories, and that's their right and everything, but then they always have to add in that dig of vilifying intent, which often they can't know that one way or the other. And I'm just trying to say often, as Elle just said, and Elle knows more now, but there are times in the lives of people with BPD when they really do not know. So they don't have that intent. Doesn't make a lot of difference for people who are getting hurt exactly, but I think people should think about that more, because to vilify an ex with BPD is not gonna, it's not gonna help you to feel better. But so many people do that. And other people that talk about BPD, not everybody, but some online, I mean anywhere online somewhere, you're gonna find people vilifying people with BPD. And there might be a small percentage that deserve that, because they might be BPD, comorbid NPD, they might be, other comorbidities and co-occurring and addiction and a lot of other things go into it that make the whole picture more painful and complicated. Allie, hearing you speak is exactly how I felt back then. Yes. Well, there was a time when I had BPD, I didn't know what I was doing either. And, we can't justify it with that statement. But again, it goes to the lack of intent to hurt, even though people end up hurt. And Albert, can it get worse with BPD as you get older? Well, yes, against what the pseudoscience of American psychiatry says, that they can't get better, and psychiatry is going to develop some, quote, cure, unquote, which nobody needs, because you can heal and recover from BPD without any cure. Psychiatry is never going to proffer or offer a cure. It's not what they're there for. But the thing is, then they'll say, well, but people when they're like 40, 50, 50, 60, they're going to just automatically remit, and they're just going to somehow be like better. No, doesn't happen like that either. That's the other side of their mouth that makes no sense. So yes, a lot of people with BPD will in fact get worse as they get older. It's definitely true of narcissists as well. It doesn't happen for all with BPD, but untreated, it's not just going to go away by itself. So I think, yeah, that what psychiatry in the U.S. says about that is just, it doesn't make sense either. So, Wheels, of course she thinks I'm special, AJ. I'm basically a cartoon villain that's responsible for everything that's gone wrong in her life for the past 22 years. It takes something special to be as evil as I am. Yes, well, I get your tongue in cheek there, Wheels, yes. Because, again, I relate so much to you and just want to validate for you going back, because I don't care, I got a father who's been gone since, passed away in 1997, so how long is that ago, right? Long time. Oh, man, it just makes me smile. But BPD and PD mother is still here, but I've been no contact for 30 plus years, so with the odd little interruption, but not big deal. So the thing is that, yeah, it's like you do become a cartoon villain in their stuff, because it's all about them. It's not about you and your family of origin. It wasn't about me and my family of origin. And, yeah, wow. But in a way, I don't know if you ever had this feeling, Wheels, but no, I don't think I felt special much. Maybe twice. And it wasn't even the case. But, well, that goes to a certain kind of abuse. And when you're lied to and you're told you're special because that's why they're there doing what they're doing to you, blah. But yeah, we can sometimes, out of the depravity of our childhoods in these families of origin, think that just getting attention from them is a little special, even when it totally sucks. Because as kids, we're hungry for what we need, and being, like a parent, and we don't get them. Yeah, well, I'm glad you came by, Natalie, and that's great, because I have to get going in a couple minutes myself. And it's always good to see you. And yeah, so I just think that it's interesting because the topic, right, that I started out with, and hopefully a little information at the beginning was helpful. But then we have, 3 or 4 people, sorry, I didn't really count. 1, 2, at least 3 people, if not 4, with BPD. Yeah, 4 at one point in time on the stream here. And one is struggling, with not being able to go no contact from a narcissist. And I hope we'll get into therapy because it would really benefit them to do that. And 3 others are more aware and, working through things. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. I hope it stands as maybe these wonderful people can be an example if you're watching the stream back and you're with somebody with BPD and you're a codependent and they're not getting help. Well, don't let these people stand as an example for you to have false hope longer. But people with BPD really can and do change, grow, get more aware, and work toward recovery and recover. But that's not going to save your relationship. And so as much as you can learn from these wonderful people with BPD and where they're at, you need not to let that give you false hope as a codependent with the person with BPD in your life if they're not sounding like these people, which is very aware, very self-aware, understanding there was a time when they hurt people and didn't know it, and now they understand that, so they're working not to hurt people, etc. So I think it's really, amazing. You guys are all amazing, and it's astounding when this happens on a live stream, like really positive. But I just wanted to caution anybody with codependence who might watch parts or all of this live stream back that this is what can happen for many people with BPD, but each and every one of them chose it. Just like I chose what I chose to get the full recovery from BPD. And so if the person you're with is at ground zero, denying it, you argue over it all the time, they don't want to hear it, they don't think they have anything wrong with them. If you're codependent, those are all big red flags. It's time for you to make the toughest choice you can and get out of there. So don't let all these wonderful people here, and 4 of them with BPD, and 1 still needing to come a little further, and the other 3 really getting really aware and moving forward. Don't let them give you false hope for that person in your life if you're not seeing anything like what you're seeing from these people here with BPD, with that person with BPD in your life. I think that's just an important thing to add in there. And I don't mean anything against anybody here. I hope you understand, sort of like speaking to both sides at the same time. And yeah, well, I'm going to get going in a couple minutes, Allie. So, but I'm glad you made it, and thank you for all you shared. And Albert, AJ, did you know you needed help with your BPD? Well, I have a longer story to tell than this, but I got labeled with BPD, and I was atypical for BPD, but I struggled with some BPD. But I think it's going to be, I can't just say this in pieces, it's probably irresponsible. I probably never had full-blown BPD. I had what they're now just pioneering the understanding of, which is low BPD, high CPTSD. So I don't know how that's going to affect. I think that can be true of a lot of people, not just me. So, but yes, I knew. So I got told I had BPD, by a psychiatrist I never saw before the day I saw him or after. And he just announced this. Nobody assessed me for it, labeled me with it. But the long and the short of it is, when I was 16 is when I saw my first psychologist. And, I was still living at home, but like, hey, I got a little extra emotional. My parents were like, we'll take you anywhere, just shut up, like, you know what I mean? And so then, at 17, I moved back to the city where I was born in, to go to college, and then I was in university soon after that, like about a year and a half later. So the thing is, I was only out on my own for not even 2 full weeks. I was living in what was a nurse's residence of a college. I wasn't taking nursing, but and there was a hospital across the bridge. And I walked across the bridge and I went to the outpatient psychiatry, and I said, yeah, I need to talk to somebody. But I didn't know that it was, at least in part, BPD. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know what was wrong. It was 1975, but I did know that I needed a lot of help. Like I knew I was hurting. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't understand all the problems I had. But I think once I got out into the world of my own, and I was glad to get out of the family of origin. So when I was 17, I was happy to go. But then I think I was quickly realizing too that, like, without the chaos and the drama of the family of origin, I just got like really this sort of empty, painful lostness inside of me because I didn't know who I was. I didn't know that was why. So anyway, I started seeking help when I was 16, and I continued all the way through until, I got to recovery around the age of 30. So, I mean, I was going through it from the age of 16 to 30. And, of course, in my late 20s and towards 30, really getting to recovery. So, and then I got to recovery, full recovery. But the thing is, it was all those years in between, seeing different therapists and talking to different people, and then I would get into the group therapy program that I got into. So I always knew that I needed help, but I didn't know why for a good 10 years of that time. So, Roller Girl, some people are like children on the inside, living in their adult body, expressing themselves as big kids. Well, yeah, a lot of people with BPD could be in that category, and then maybe some people don't even have BPD and they're in that category, right? It's hard to say. And Roller Girl, that's all of us, actually me included. Well, it's not all of us. I don't know if you mean all of us as in you have BPD yourself, but it's not all of us in the population because, but it's important that each person, even if they don't have a diagnosis, right? People need often to get some help and therapy, and they might not know why. It might be different reasons, people with codependency included, that they need to work on their adulting. So it's maybe different various degrees of what does that process of adulting really look like and mean. And Wheels, yeah, I can relate to that. I was told by another, oh yes, one of those of yours, growing up, sometimes I feel special for surviving and seemingly being the person with the most empathy. Well, I think that is special about you, Wheels. You did survive, and you did come out of that with empathy. It's like I walked out of my family of origin wholly different as well, even when I couldn't get my crap together when I was younger. You're welcome, little girl. And you're welcome too, Albert. Hope to see you again sometime. It was nice to see you, so to speak, And Roller Girl, I mean, we're all like kids sometimes. Yeah, but you said you're 55. Ah, cool. You're sort of like, well, not my generation really, but kind of just below, I guess. Guess those like 7 years difference matter, right? Starts anew. But anyways, I was just going to say, we can all be like kids sometimes, yes, but once we achieve average mental health, or we're averagely healthy, I don't even have mental health, I don't know, then I know what I've experienced in my life over the years is, yes, there's a childlike quality, because we all have these 3 ego states, right? So when they're in relative healthy balance and we're emotionally healthy, then we will experience the child part in ourselves more spontaneously and more in a fun way, as opposed to the wounded inner child that, is fragmented off from in BPD, but in codependency not to that degree. But when people have a wounded inner child and they haven't done the reparation and the recovery and healing work there, they're going to be childish or lose emotional control at times, and that's childlike. That's different than the spontaneous experience of the child that lives within all of us. When that child is healthy, the inner child, the child ego state is healthy and integrated. So that's the difference I would just delineate there. And Wheels, I've worked hard to be the opposite of what I deal with. Even before I knew much about what it was, I refused to be defined by the damage they caused. Well, good for you, Wheels, because I think you've got that, and I'm sure others too. We share that same sort of spirited determination, because I remember as a kid looking into my mother's hard, cold, bitter eyes and saying, I'm never going to be like that. Like, I was like that too. I just started peeling the opposite way in so many ways. But luckily, and just kind of thank God, I think for you and like myself, and many other people, obviously, we just aren't cut from the same cloth. We just aren't like them. And something in their childhoods got, devastated them to, I mean, not that your life hasn't been devastating and mine years ago wasn't, and everybody's in that situation. But there's something about us, especially when we're the scapegoats, that we find a way to survive. And we keep seeking after our own truth. And we often do. Like everything the parents like seem to like or were interested in, or they're smoking and they're drinking, their alcoholism and all that junk. I was like, whoa, I was going the opposite way, which actually worked well for me because I avoided a lot of very, very unhealthy pitfalls because I just, everything about them, I was like, yike, I'm going this way. And we do that before we even know what we're doing. But I think it's a really positive thing that a lot of people go through, even when you're going through a lot of pain. So anyway, with that, I got to get going, and I'm aware of the time. And I just wonder if there's anything I want to say in closing. Again, just that, people with borderline personality who haven't got any treatment, aren't getting self-aware, aren't growing, aren't taking personal responsibility or accountability, can't talk about it, unlike people on the stream here. Don't let what you're seeing here, which is great, and what these people are sharing and where they're at, don't let that give you false hope about that person in your life if they are not taking accountability, not taking responsibility. And people with codependency have to really, and I don't just mean this in a 12-step Codependence Anonymous way, because I still think that's pretty outdated these days. It might help some people a little bit, but it works off the old definition of codependency, which we have long since, revamped and got, I believe, much more accurate now. So it's really important for people with codependency to know that you're living your own life script of injunctions, family of origin roles, and you are externalizing out things to get away from pain that you need to address in a wounded inner child. And you need to make that most difficult choice as soon as you can when you're with somebody who's not even acknowledging BPD, maybe isn't diagnosed, doesn't understand, doesn't know, no responsibility, all those red flags. Then you need to know you're in over your head, you're overgiving, you're losing yourself, and that all that's going to continue to happen between people with BPD who aren't seeking any treatment, and even if they start to seek treatment while you're in the relationship, it's too late. You need to know that your worlds are going to collide emotionally and relationally, and you're going to continue to perpetuate, if you're codependent, your unhealthy relational patterns that you might not even be consciously aware of. So I hope that that's helpful. And yes, everybody. Oh, Karen, I agree with that. I just can't say anything or I'll be under the bus again, if you know what I mean. Because I was once, and I'm never going to let that pass a second time with being quiet. Because I knew what you're saying there. I knew that from the get-go. That's how I made the stupid mistake I did make. Because it was me trying to help, to try to protect people, and I can't do that. So that was my last codependent act. And I'm not that codependent in my life anymore, but it was my last codependent act on the freaking channel. But I'm glad that you know that, because I saw you over there, and who's ever over there, that's their business, right? But I just hope more and more people will wake up to what's going on here, there, and other places on YouTube. Let me just be more general. So oh, thank you for that, Wheels. Yes, likes are always appreciated, and because it's interesting, every time I stream, I shouldn't say this, but they especially come out to thumb down the streams. For some reason. Who knows why. And this or that bit, who cares? So the point is, anyway, yes, on YouTube, And there are other people out there on YouTube too that we want to warn people, or we want to say something, or ask people to just, hey, be careful about other people in general and online and other areas online. And that was my big, mistake apparently. So, got to be very general, vague, and careful. But yeah, if ever anything like that happens again, then I will be addressing, the reality of what is really happening in certain corners, so to speak. So, for what that would be worth, you know what I'm saying? Because a lot of people just get hoodwinked and keep on going. Like, stay and keep getting hoodwinked. Thank you, Karen. And Robert, thanks, AJ. Your work helps me navigate this stuff and get beyond my wounds. I'm really glad, Robert. It's nice to see you again, too. And, thank you, Roller Gold. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Look forward to next time. Glad I persevered tonight because I tried 3 times. Literally nobody was here, because then I finally thought, well, did a message go out? Because, sometimes people aren't going to find me. And then I looked on, I thought, oh, look on your channel. And I looked at my channel and the thing didn't even show up. And I'm like, okay, this isn't working. Anyway, thank you all for coming, and thank you so much for what you all shared. And I hope a little bit of what I might have inputted helped as well. But what you all shared tonight about, especially some of you with BPD, etc. too, but everybody in general, can really help other people. And I hope that people will watch these streams. That's why I want to make sure they don't go any longer than about now, and will be able to learn. So everybody that comes here, participates and shares or asks questions, I super appreciate you. You support each other, and you're helping me to help other people as well. And not only helping me to help other people, you're actually helping other people too. So that's courageous and brave of you, and very important, and I value and cherish that greatly. I hope you know. So everybody take care, and until next time. And I might be in the near future looking at a day or 2 a week to stream, and I will have set times, and I'm gonna need to do that because there will be other live streams afoot. So that will probably give me the motivation I need to work against the Asperger's. I'm just setting times, but even when I set the time like an hour and ahead or something tonight, I still was a little bit late there was the technical problems, and then I was a few minutes. No, I wasn't late to this one because I didn't preset it ahead. So you can't be late when you're just doing it. Anyway, everybody take care, and looking forward to next time, and thank you for all your input, all your sharing, and take good care of yourself, and I seriously mean that. I do care. Bye for now.